Have you ever wondered what happens when traditional banks try to handle Bitcoin? Recently, major financial institutions have been rushing to offer Bitcoin services, but according to one banking insider, this could lead to the biggest bank failure we've ever seen. On this episode of the TFTC podcast, I'm sitting down with Caitlin Long, founder and CEO of Custodia Bank. Long has spent over 2 decades in traditional banking before becoming one of the most influential voices in Bitcoin banking regulation. Through her unique experience building Custodia, she's watched how traditional banks approach Bitcoin, and she's deeply concerned about what she's seeing. Through my work at 1031, I've seen firsthand how traditional banks are scrambling to understand Bitcoin. In the next few minutes, you'll learn why mixing traditional banking practices with Bitcoin could lead to a major global bank collapse, why Michael Saylor and other Bitcoin advocates might be dangerously wrong about Bitcoin leverage, and how states like Wyoming are reimagining energy markets through Bitcoin mining. What Long reveals about banks' approach to Bitcoin risk management might completely change how you think about the future of banking.
I think that Bitcoin, I've predicted it before, but I'll say it again. I think that Bitcoin is going to take down a global systemically important bank. We see this with all the big banks wanting to pile into Bitcoin, and they're going to fractionally reserve it. They're going to rehypothecate it. They're going to commingle it with prime brokerage collateral and let people substitute when there's a margin call. I'll substitute a T-bill or Apple stock for the margin call that I got on my Bitcoin loan, and they're going to find themselves fractional, and it's going to take down a large bank. And I do believe that that's eventually going to happen because these banks don't have the risk management mindset. They've got, to Austin Campbell's point, the 1970s mindset of let's just diversify the risk, as opposed to no, let's actually segregate it and shut the asset liability risk and margin call risk down. You can do that and have a vibrant economy. And I will say something controversial here. There are a number of Bitcoiners who are hardcore, hey, we ought to have raw leverage on Bitcoin. And you've heard me say this before, a fool and his Bitcoin are soon parted. Fascinating debate in Safe's podcast with Michael Saylor that was recorded last week. The last hour of it is the two of them arguing over this very point. Michael Saylor just thinks it's the greatest thing ever that the large banks are coming for Bitcoin and that we can all leverage our Bitcoin. And Safe views it the way I do, which is that is way too risky.
This prediction from Caitlin Long is particularly striking because of her unique position at the intersection of traditional banking and Bitcoin. Through her work at Custodia Bank, she's witnessed firsthand how traditional banks approach risk management. Her warning about fractional reserve banking with Bitcoin highlights a fundamental misunderstanding that many traditional financial institutions have about this new asset class. At 1031, we see this tension playing out in real time. Banks want to treat Bitcoin like any other asset, but Bitcoin's unique properties make this incredibly dangerous. When banks start rehypothecating Bitcoin, using it as collateral, and mixing it with traditional assets, they're essentially playing with fire. The key issue here isn't just about leverage, it's about trying to apply old banking practices to an asset that functions completely differently from anything these institutions have ever handled. What makes this prediction particularly compelling is that we're already seeing major banks announce their intentions to offer Bitcoin services without seemingly understanding these fundamental risks. They're rushing into a market they don't fully understand, driven by client demand rather than a deep understanding of the asset.
Andreas, I think, put it best. Bitcoin is a disinflationary asset. It is not an asset that inherently has yield. And if you are investing in Bitcoin yield, that yield is coming from somewhere, and you better go figure out where the yield's coming from and whether the yield is appropriately compensating you for the risk. And I think Michael puts way too much faith in the large banks for their ability to risk manage this. They've never seen anything like Bitcoin. This is the apex predator, to borrow a phrase from Trace Mayer from years ago. This is the apex predator of finance. If they get themselves leveraged at all, more than 1-to-1, they're going to get in trouble at some point. And I guarantee you they're going to get themselves leveraged more than 1-to-1. They don't have the risk systems to segregate Bitcoin, and they don't have the...
Gets to the heart of a crucial question facing the industry. On one side, you have Michael Saylor's vision of leveraging Bitcoin through traditional banking systems to maximize returns. On the other, you have Long's more cautious approach that recognizes Bitcoin's unique nature as a disinflationary asset. What's fascinating here is her reference to Bitcoin as the apex predator of finance. This isn't just colorful language, it's a warning about how Bitcoin's fundamental properties make it resistant to traditional banking practices. These banks are used to managing risk with assets they can control or influence through market operations. Bitcoin removes that control, making their standard risk management practices not just inadequate, but potentially dangerous. The fact that we're seeing this philosophical divide between major figures in the Bitcoin space highlights just how early we are in understanding the implications of integrating Bitcoin into traditional financial systems. Long's warning about yield and risk is particularly relevant as we see more banks and financial institutions trying to create Bitcoin-based financial products without fully understanding the underlying risks.
Because right now, energy costs, Wyoming is one of the largest energy producing states, and 90% of the energy that we produce gets exported outside of the state. And so the state doesn't benefit from it other than just the mineral royalties that get paid into the state. And by the way, that's why we have a sovereign wealth fund. The state has net assets, not net debt. It's one of two states in the country that has net assets, even taking its public sector pension obligations into account. It's Wyoming and Alaska that have net assets as states, because we do get mineral royalties, but we haven't built industries and jobs around the exporting of that energy. And if we can keep it in Wyoming, great. But part of the reason we don't is the Public Utilities Commission forces a subsidy for the transmission costs. So, that problem got solved in Texas when it got deregulated and ERCOT started to develop actually market-based solutions. And what's going on in the Bitcoin mining space. No one articulates it better than you do, how that helps to balance the Texas grid and how it helps to keep power prices down in Texas. And I hope Wyoming does the same thing. And keep an eye on Chuck Gray. There are other, of course, politicians. I can't thank Senator Chris Rothfuss enough. He's the Democrat I mentioned earlier. And then, of course, Senator Lummis, Governor Gordon. They've all just been big supporters of what we're doing here, and they're appalled at what the federal government has done to the state, and they're fighting.
States will lead the way. And I know we're going over time. We only booked an hour. I had the last question. I prepped you for it earlier. But looking ahead, what is a bold prediction or idea you have for our industry that you think many people would disagree with? The energy discussion here reveals another critical aspect of Bitcoin's relationship with traditional finance, its ability to monetize stranded energy assets. Wyoming's situation perfectly illustrates both the problem and the opportunity. When 90% of a state's energy production gets exported with minimal local benefit, it creates an inefficient market. Bitcoin mining offers a solution by providing a way to monetize excess energy production directly on site. This isn't just about mining profits, it's about fundamentally changing how energy markets operate. The fact that Wyoming maintains a sovereign wealth fund and net positive assets shows they understand resource management. But as Long suggests, they haven't yet fully leveraged their energy advantages. This represents a massive opportunity for Bitcoin to reshape not just banking, but energy markets as well. What's particularly interesting is how this model could be replicated across other energy-producing states, creating a new paradigm for local energy utilization and economic development. Through our work at 1031, we're seeing increasing interest from traditional energy producers in understanding how Bitcoin mining could help optimize their operations and create new revenue streams. Let me know in the comments. Do you think traditional banks are underestimating Bitcoin's power to disrupt their business models? Are we going to see a major bank fail because of poor Bitcoin risk management? I read every comment, and I'm especially interested in hearing from those of you who work in traditional finance. If you found this concerning, you need to understand how this fits into the broader war on Bitcoin banking. In our previous video, we exposed how Elizabeth Warren and federal regulators secretly forced Bitcoin-friendly banks to close, even though they were completely solvent. The connection between traditional banks misunderstanding Bitcoin and regulators targeting Bitcoin-friendly banks reveals a system that's desperately trying to maintain control. Click the video on your screen now to understand exactly how this coordinated attack on Bitcoin banking unfolded and what it means for the future of finance. If you want to stay ahead of these critical developments in the battle for monetary freedom, subscribe to the channel where we break down these crucial stories every week. Stack sats and stay humble.